Show on YouTube, Into the Fringe, where we discuss lost civilizations, UFOs, cryptids, unsolved mysteries, megalithic structures, extraterrestrials, interdimensional portals, time skips, and more. Don't change that channel, because now you are leaving the mainstream and entering into the fringe. Well, greetings, followers. It is I, Cardinal Sin, and welcome to Into the Fringe number 108. And tonight, our guest is the one and only Christopher O'Brien. From 1992 to 2002, Christopher O'Brien investigated over 1,000 paranormal events reported in the San Luis Valley, located in south central Colorado and north central New Mexico. Working with law enforcement officials, ex-military ranchers, and an extensive network of skywatchers, he documented what may have been the most intense wave of unexplained activity ever seen in a single region of North America. His 10-year investigation resulted in the 3 books of his Mysterious Valley trilogy: The Mysterious Valley, Enter the Valley, and Secrets of the Mysterious Valley. His meticulous field investigation of UFO reports, unexplained livestock deaths, haunted sites, Native American legends, cryptozoology, secret military activity, and the folklore found in the world's largest alpine valley has produced one of the largest databases of unusual occurrences gathered from a single geographic region. He is currently working with a team of specialists installing a high-tech video surveillance and hard data monitoring system in and around the San Luis Valley. His latest book, Stalking the Herd, has been called the most important book ever written, examining our relationship with cattle and how this has manifested into the modern cattle mutilation mystery. Welcome back, my friend, Christopher O'Brien, to Into the Fringe. Too much intro?
I don't know. Sometimes I hear that, and it's like hard to imagine that somebody could actually have gone through all that and remained relatively unscathed. But somehow I managed.
You did manage. And I just want to acknowledge some folks that are in the chat. Cosmic Squirrel is here. Hail. Says he's all set. Ari is here. Wayutan. Nicholas Horton is in the house. Miskatonic Madman is here. Good to see you. Philip Black is back. Radioactive. Rui Goncalves is here. Russell Gill is here. Nicholas Horton says cryptids. Farrah Jade is here. Good to see Farrah Jade here. And let's go ahead and get right to it, because we have a lot of stuff to cover. How have you been? I know a lot of us here were concerned to hear about your trip to the ER due to the effects of the smoke from the wildfires. Are you back to normal?
Back.
Whatever
the smoke's back, so my lungs are a little bit tenuous. You might see me dipping into my nebulizer or my Edgar Casey lung remedy called Inspiral, which is a turpentine, eucalyptus. It's got a bunch of good stuff in it for your lungs. Yeah, rectified. It's rectified oil of turpentine, rectified beechwood creosote, distillate, and pine needles, tolu balsam, oil tincture of benzoin, and it's in a grain alcohol base. And basically, what it does is it expands your lungs. It does it au natural without steroids and albuterol, which I also do have to use occasionally.
I had to take albuterol once.
Yeah, well, we have the smoke back, so my lungs are feeling the effects of it, even inside.
Where are you living these days?
I'm in right above the border of Pennsylvania in upstate New York, about 40 minutes west of Binghamton.
I remember you saying, for some reason, a lot of weird stuff happens in upstate New York.
Yeah, it does. Above and beyond the very, very red state right-wing political types up here with their big Trump flags fluttering from the back of their pickup trucks. And
hey, man, I live in Kansas. Come on.
Yeah, I know. I don't have to tell you anything. Anyway, it's a very interesting area. We've had recently, just on the other side of the border in Pennsylvania, I'm sure some of you folks out there know Lon Strickland and his Phantoms and Monsters website, and he's got a bit of a network of researchers up in all through Pennsylvania. And we've had a couple of Dogman reports south and just west of us, yeah. And Bigfoot report, actually even more recently. And we've had a number of UFO sightings.
Are the cigarette smoking, trench coat wearing variety?
Actually, it was a group of them, which is even more interesting. They're normally only seen singly, sometimes in pairs, but this was 3 or 4 of them, and that's a little on the unusual side. And Lon's got it all locked down. I offer to help out, and he says, "Oh no, I've got people working on it already. Thanks, but no thanks." So, I guess all the 30 years of field investigative experience doesn't count much out here on the East Coast. Oh, you're from the Four Corners area. We don't need your help.
Right.
So anyway, I like Lon. He does a good job. Oftentimes, you really can't track down. You try to get to the bottom of some of these cases that he puts online, and I tend to have a hard time. Huh?
Lon Strickler?
Yeah.
Yeah, we've had him on the show. Mm-hmm. He's a prolific writer. I got to say that for him.
Yeah, true. He is, and I think a lot of the stuff that comes out of his side is intriguing. That's for sure. But when stuff happens less than 20 miles from your house and you offer to help, I think I kind of passed the audition several decades ago when it comes to being a proficient field investigator, and it's to not even be thanked for offering is
yeah.
What can you do? He doesn't know me. Who the hell are you, pal?
Well, we should get both of you on the show at some time.
Yeah, well, I've been a huge fan of course, everybody's favorite Pennsylvania researcher, Stan Gordon, who has been a real hero of mine, and then over to the east, of course, is we have a couple of James Fox is now in Vermont. I've been up to his place a couple of times, and then Lauren Coleman I've been a fan of his since I was in high school, and his work as an up and coming researcher being helped along by Ivan Sanderson, who I also have had a deep respect for many, many years.
All people that I'd really like to get on the show, with the exception of the last one, obviously, because
Sanderson's been dead for 30 years, so
dead, or at least they took the liberty of burying him.
Yeah, maybe we could do an Ouija board session or something, a seance or something, and maybe
you never know,
get his opinion.
Well, we're sure glad you can be with us. You're a fan favorite, a friend, and nothing more important than your health, right?
Yeah, it's been pretty rough, but having COPD and having heart failure. Not a good
I forgot.
combination. So
You
yeah,
were a band guy, so you were a smoker.
40 years.
Oh my goodness.
But I cold turkeyed 8 years ago, so my lungs have never
Well,
been worse.
I guess you have experience taking smoke into your lungs. No, that doesn't work. Um, while people are rolling in, I would just like to remind folks to stick around until the end of the show. We're giving away a copy of George Hansen's book, The Trickster and the Paranormal.
Oh boy.
You must be present in the chat to be eligible to win. The mods will drop a link that you can follow to enter the giveaway at about 8:20 Central.
Highly recommended.
At about 8:50. Yeah, actually, you were the one that recommended this to me. And,
yeah, George's book really got me on a roll and
it's
inspired me to write my own book on the Trickster.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about that tonight. And first of all, Chris, just thanks so much for spending time with us tonight to talk about these fascinating topics that are the foundation of your firsthand investigations. I think it's safe to say that you're arguably the world's foremost authority on them, with the possible exception of your mentor, David Perkins.
Yeah, David is hands down my favorite creative thinker, really, in the entire field of the paranormal and UFOs. And he came up with a very interesting comment, which I've been, when he first told me it, I said, well, I don't know about that. But ever since, it's slowly been dawning on me that he's probably correct. And that is, if we want to figure out consciousness, we're going to have to figure out the UFO enigma, or at least some breakthrough thinking about it, because that's going to lead us on a journey that will invariably help decipher what consciousness is. And if we want to know what UFOs are, we need to dig into the cattle mutilation mystery, because they're all inexorably linked, and one leads to the other leads to the other. So David is an incredibly smart guy. Pardon me?
One thing that I've found, Chris, is that it all seems to be interconnected. Everything that we call paranormal seems to be interconnected.
Yeah.
Especially talking about Stan Gordon, UFOs, Bigfoot, at the same time, in the same area, ghosts, ESP, Akashic Record, whatever.
Aberrant social behavior, weird weather. It's all related, and it all somehow is connected. And I've been saying this ever since I really got involved in studying this publicly and publishing, my results of some of my investigations 30 years ago when I got started. But I've always said that this
30 years already.
Yeah,
wow.
Yeah, over 30 years I've been doing this, and of course reading and doing my own sort of amateur and investigative work, even further back than that, all the way back into the 70s, when I had my first UFO sighting in New Paltz, New York, with a group of friends, and chasing around after the Hudson Valley triangles. There was a number of people that I know that when I was in college that saw them, and I went out on more than a few occasions, camped in above the Hudson looking for Night Siege.
The Hudson Valley. Night Siege, that's it. Yeah.
Yeah.
By the way, do you know when you and David will publish Mute Speak, the follow-up to Stalking the Herd?
Well, yeah, we're kind of on the straightaway here, coming down the home stretch with it. We've got all the material that we need to put it together. We have one last session to do to kind of like after the rodeo sort of aftermath bit, but all the information that we're going to be using in the book is complete, and it's just a matter of whittling it all down, because we have such a huge amount of information that we've got. It would probably, if put all together, would be about 800 or 900 pages. So we've got a
publisher's going to tell you to whittle that down, right?
Well, we're self-publishing it. I will never be with another publisher again after what I've been.
A 2-volume set, right?
Well, Stalking the Herd will be the first volume, and then Mute Speak will be.
You're going to put the whole 900 pages in one book?
No, it'll be whittled down to 500 or 600 pages.
Okay.
The second one, there's some redundancies in there, and we just have to do the last editing pass on it. and get it in order. We have all our chapter headings ready and everything ready to plug in.
Well, I
Davis
can't
just hasn't been
wait.
doing well, so he's been on a bit of a hiatus recently. So
And are you still keeping track of Ray Stanford and his work? Any updates you can tell us
yeah,
about?
Ray is rapidly being eaten up by Alzheimer's disease, which
Oh,
I'm really sorry
sorry.
to say, but he's still cognizant enough so that he can continue doing his work, but he needs increasingly more and more help from people that are close to him and Sheila, his wife. But I'm really glad that Jeffrey Mishlove, of course, the famous psychologist who wrote one of the seminal books on consciousness called The Roots of Consciousness back in the late 70s, and covered Ray's work with the Association for the Understanding of Man, AUM, and recently, this past year, has done a series of interviews, hour-long interviews with Ray that you can find on YouTube.
Oh,
And just put Jeffrey Mishlove, Mishlove, plus Ray Stanford, and there's quite a number of them up there, including how to interpret UFO photographs and purported films, where we need to go with instrumented hard data research, and
how do you spell his last name? Jeffrey what?
Mishlove, Mishlove,
Gotcha.
and so there's about 5 or 6 hours of video interviews with Ray that I highly recommend. They were able to sit down before the Alzheimer's really made it almost impossible.
Yeah.
But he's getting ready to present some material. I'm not sure how he's going to do it, but he's getting up there. He just had his I think 85th birthday. So
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
he's
he's done a
he's
lot of
good.
important work, and I
Yeah.
remember even back on the Paracast hearing from you about all the important evidence and
Oh
stuff that
yeah.
he's got.
Yeah.
And
I've
it
got a
turned
whole
out
book on his life that's been completed for a number of years. That I'm just
that you wrote.
well, it's me interviewing him for hundreds of hours and
Oh,
then
great.
writing a transcript of his answers in his own words and
So
putting it in a cognizant order. He tends to
at some
jump
point,
around
you're
when
going
he
to
tells
publish that
stories.
as a book too.
Huh?
At some point, you're going to publish that as a book too.
Yes, it's ready to go.
Oh,
Yeah.
great. Camera ready and everything. Great.
Yeah.
Cool.
There you go.
Um,
New Thinking Aloud. That is the Jeffrey Mishlove series. And Ray
yeah.
Stanford, I think, was 4 episodes of that. Maybe even more. 5.
Thank you, Philip Blair, for that clue. I am
Thanks, Phil.
generally pretty clueless. Um, I wanted to start out with a few miscellaneous questions because, we're going to be talking about these different subjects, and I have some just miscellany that I wanted to get out of the way at the beginning. Is the San Luis Valley still a UFO hotspot?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, there's stuff constantly going on there. I've often joked that it's normal for people to see unusual things there. That's why they don't report it, because it's become a part of the everyday reality around there. Seeing the silver discs and spears in the air is commonplace, and we now have a second UFO-DAP array that's going in there. I think it's actually in now. Which reminds me, I should remind everybody that we're now at 53 locations. I think 9 states, 2 Canadian provinces, and 11 countries. So UFO-DAP has taken off, and we're hoping to start to get the kind of visual evidence and scientific data that will enable us to get Avi Loeb and the SCU people, Robert Powell and the folks at Scientific UAP. What is it? I forget what I forget what. Let's see. It's
Could be UFO.
SCU. It's scientific. What the hell is it? It's the guys down in Alabama. All the academics down there that have their
Dr. Travis Taylor.
No, this is Robert Powell and the guys from Kufos, Alexander Wendt, Mark Rodiger. There's a bunch of academics down there. They have conferences every year, and scientific UAP studies or something. Yeah, here's our gear that we're slowly spreading around the world. We're in Cyprus. We're in Australia. We have 3 sites in Germany. We're in Switzerland, Brazil. The list goes on and on. If you go to project sites, their current installations, you'll see the list and the map of all the places that we're located. And go further down, you'll see the list of actual locations.
Oh my goodness! I didn't realize there were so many.
Yeah.
I want one. I want 3.
Not all of them have the multi cameras and the actual the MSDAU, which is the square box that you see underneath the camera.
Right.
That's the unit that has the recording magnetometers, recording gravimeters and accelerometers, a radio frequency spectrum analyzer, and it's all open source, written in Python, and it's all on a Raspberry Pi module, which makes it really easy.
I watched in preparation for tonight, I watched the presentation by Ron
Olschow.
Yeah, and it was, I noticed that he calls it UFO DAS, like system instead of project. Are you still in touch with Ron?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, we've been dovetailing our efforts ever since we combined the San Luis Valley Camera Project with his work and created UFODAP, and now we're partners with UFO Data, which is Mark Rodiger, Alexander Wendt, I think Rob Switek and Leslie Keene. They were doing something similar to what we were doing, but we beat them to the punch. Mm-hmm. And they gave us a ring and said, "Hey, let's go ahead and combine our efforts." So we're collecting the data, setting up getting the system set up, and they're going to be the ones that are going to take the data and crunch it and analyze it.
Right.
And Avi Loeb should be calling at some point if he can get it out of his own way and admit that there are people that have already been doing this longer than he has, that he didn't invent the automobile.
Yeah. or the data acquisition idea. Actually, I guess that was Ray's idea back in the 70s, right?
Well, it even goes back further than that, but he was the first one to really have an actual operation that they could hang their hat on, and he actually was able to record some very, very interesting events, and he was able to take his show on the road as well. And they had a portable stripped down version that they recorded some events in Arizona and in New Mexico that are groundbreaking.
All right. Well, not to open up on you with a gotcha question, but would you tell us?
Yeah, good luck.
Would you tell us about the personal experience you had when you were almost 7?
Yeah, I was followed around my neighborhood with obvious intent. They were pretty curious. There's 4 little guys, same size as I was. I was, 6? And they were about 3.5, 4 feet tall. Real spindly. I called them stickmen. Mm-hmm. And they had these glittering, I called them spears. I didn't know what else to call them, but they were wands about the same height as they were. And they gave off a multicolored sort of flickering light. I didn't really have much of a choice. I was trying to get to a phone. They kept heading me off. I was trying to get to my parents' side of the house, to their bedroom, so I could crawl under their bed or in the bed, something. And they ended up kind of herding me outdoors, and I ended up going next door to one neighbor, and then I went to another neighbor, and then ended up 5 houses away some indeterminate amount of time later. One of the neighbors saw me outside, and before they could get to the door and grab me, they said I disappeared, and so they called my house, and my older sister answered, and she went out looking for me and found me 5 houses away from where I last remember being. This was in the early spring of '63, I think.
Wow.
Right before my 7th birthday. And from that point on, I knew without any question that we weren't alone, that we weren't being told everything that's really going on in our reality, and I devoured every book, every magazine, every article I could find on UFOs, aliens. I knew all about the Hill case early on. I read Incident at Exeter the week it came out. I read everything that I could get my hands on by Ray Fuller and
John Fuller.
And Donald Keogh, and I even got into the Chandlers peripherally. I never believed them, but because whatever these creatures were, they didn't try to communicate with me. They were just watching me, and it was really creepy. And at one point I yelled at them, "What do you want? What do you want? Why are you following me?"
They didn't speak at all, right?
No communication. Never saw any ship. Never had any indication that I was dealing with something that was off planet. That's why I've always had a sneaking hunch that we're dealing with something that has lived here probably longer than we have, and we may be the aliens, and they may be more terrestrial than we are.
Well, like I said, it's all interrelated, right?
Yep. So that was a life-changing event. It was probably one of the most important events that I've experienced in my life, and I've experienced a lot. So that really got my bandwagon going.
Can you tell us the story of the yellow CH-47 whirlybird?
Yeah. Oh boy, that one really got me too. That was a close second. I had just started my first investigations in the first week of 1993, January 1993, and I'd given a New Year's Eve party and found out that there was a cattle mutilation the same night. We had an incredible sighting over the little town that I lived in. 200-foot ovals came down on December 9th, 92, and flew over the town, and it was at night, just after sunset, and they flew out over the valley, and about 18 out of the 200 people that lived in the town saw them. I was able to get 12 of them to open up and be interviewed for an article that I decided I was going to write for the local paper, and I had about 2 weeks before the article had to be turned in, and so I hit the local college, the sociology department head, and all the sheriff's departments. I hit the astronomy department, and they have one of those sky domes and a telescope and everything, and I found some of the early investigators into the San Luis Valley. Tom Adams, David Perkins. I talked to the owner of Snippy the horse, and I also talked to my local county sheriff. Saguache County, where I was living, had never really registered officially any cattle mutilation cases, and so I went to the sheriff and said, "Do you have any files that may help me figure out the extent of these cases back in the '70s?" And he says, "Oh yeah, we've got some files down there." He says, "Chances are they're probably gone, but I'll take a look for you." And he showed up with some paperwork and 24 photographs. And fortunately, the deputy that was alive at the time, and it was a young guy investigating these cases in the '70s. He was still alive, and I was able to sit down with him, and he ID'd all the photographs and told me which ranches they all belonged to.
Wow.
And so the closest one to me was the next town over, Virginia Sutherland. She lived about 12 miles away, and So I called her up and said, "Do you mind if I come out and talk about the bull you had mutilated in 1980?" Now, remember, this is 1993, 13 years later.
Right.
So she said, "Yeah, come on out." So I went out there and I interviewed her and her son, and they said, "Yeah, we were sitting down to dinner one night, and it was the first week of June, 1980, and we heard this helicopter fly right over our house, real slow and real low. And we thought that was kind of weird. And about 20 minutes later, they heard it fire up, and it sounded like it had evidently landed about a mile south of their house. And so they ran outside, and the thing flew back in the direction that it originally come from. It was flying north to south, and they went out, and here it's coming right over their house, 50 feet, flying from south to north. And it was a relic. It was one of the first real helicopters, the UH-47, like those helicopters they used in the Korean War, like you see on the beginning of MASH.
Yep.
And they said it was this unmarked, and it was painted this really ugly. The son said baby shit yellow, whatever, mustard yellow for the G version. But they thought, well, that's weird. What the hell is this old helicopter doing landed in our field? So the next morning they went out to check where it had landed, and they found their bull mutilated, and all the insects all the flies that had landed on it and stuff had all died on it. So it was covered with a layer of dead flies, bottle flies. And she took me out there and showed me it was still there. And I took the skull home and and I painted it, which is up on my wall right here. You can see it.
Oh, you still have it? Wow.
Where is it? There it is.
Wow.
So I painted it, and so I'm interviewing him, and I'm writing copious notes, and so I go home from my interview 13 years after this had happened. And the next morning I was typing up my notes. Yes, I was using a typewriter.
Yeah.
And I hear a chug 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 sound, and I look out my window, and here comes this old UH-47 yellow helicopter flying right over my house. And when I was back in the San Luis Valley last year, I went to my ex-girlfriend who was there, and I said, "Do you remember all those things that we saw, those times we had sightings?" And she goes, "I don't remember them, but I sure remember that helicopter."
Yeah.
I mean, I was just absolutely dumbfounded, and that's when I kissed the tar baby. I still got that sucker stuck to my face.
Yeah.
That was the most amazing event, besides being followed around my neighborhood by aliens.
Yeah.
It definitely hooked me, and I've been flopping on the line ever since.
Now, Chris, I wanted to let you know that we're going to kind of go into rapid fire mode because I have a ton of questions. I researched tonight's episode pretty thoroughly, so
I'll give you the Cliff Note versions.
Yeah, we've got a lot to get to. Can you tell us what are the cheap fireworks seen in the SLV, and what do they presage?
Well, when I first moved there in '89, I started seeing these weird. At first, I thought they were just meteors, but then I realized that they were way too close. And a couple of them I saw smoke trails. Then when I saw one that was, we had a uniform overcast sky, and I was up about 2,000 feet from the valley floor, so I was looking out over the valley, and I saw one arc over the tree line. The trees would, grow on either side of the creeks that flowed down from the mountains out into the valley, and so you'd have these like veins of trees that would go out into the valley, and this thing lit up the tops of the trees and then blinked out. And I'm thinking that can't be a meteor. There's a uniform cloud layer, and the thing was lower in altitude than I was.
Hmm.
So I started to realize that this was some natural, probably natural occurring phenomenon, and I started writing down the dates when these things were happening, and started to crunch numbers about a year or two later when I started my investigative work. I realized these things were happening at the beginning of little waves of sighting activity, and then they would happen and the wave would end. So they were almost like introducing a period of heightened activity and then signaling that that period was about to end. And it was consistent all the way through the data. And I've seen, I don't know how many times I saw these things, dozens. And I've had people even say that they had to duck because they were so close to them. I had one guy call and say, you talk about those cheap fireworks. He says, well, I don't know if they're fireworks, but I can tell you, I just saw Tinkerbell crash. It was one of my favorite descriptions of them. I don't know what they are. I think that there's possibly a piezoelectrical effect that signals some sort of atmospheric conditions that maybe are conducive for sighting activity. And they do, like I said, they tend to happen at the beginning and at the end of heightened periods of sighting waves. And they tend to, if the sighting wave is going to be an extensive wave, there tend to be more of these things clustered together at the beginning and the end. If it's not going to be as long-lasting or extensive, the wave of activity, then we see less of them, but we see them at the beginning and the end. I don't know what they are. I've never been able to get a picture of one. They don't last very long. I think maybe some of them could be meteors that are misidentified, but I've had too many of them too close to me to be able to say, well, they're all just shooting stars.
Or St. Elmo's fire or whatever.
Yeah. They look like a bottle rocket, a giant bottle rocket that fizzles out and doesn't explode at the end. That's why I call them cheap fireworks, because they don't work.
Right.
It's like you can sometimes, when you go to, coming up next week, when you see the rockets go up and you can see kind of a fizzle going up with them. It's like that, except they're going parallel to the ground. And sometimes they even come down. Sometimes they go straight up. But most often they're parallel. They arch over the ground like this. And like I said, I've been as close as 40, 50 feet away from one.
Wow.
And I've had people, like the one guy said, I saw Tinkerbell crash on my porch. So go figure. I've never encountered these things being mentioned anywhere else prior to moving to Arizona, and then some of the Navajo told me that they'd seen them before around the Four Corners area, and so that there may be some sort of, I don't know, geologic conditions that may come into play with lots of quartz, maybe in dry weather, that's creating some sort of discharge, static electric, piezoelectric, like earth lights, yeah. And we do have one of the largest, the second largest thrust fault on the planet is the San Luis Valley, Sangre de Cristo Mountains, which is part of the Rio Grande thrust, which is a huge fault that goes from the 300 miles out into the Caribbean all the way to Leadville, Colorado, in the middle of the state. So that's a pretty good sized fault, and there's tons of quartz in the Sangre de Cristos, and I've seen the quartz discharge straight up into the air on super cold nights where it's 20, 30 below and single digit humidity, only 3 or 4% humidity, and sometimes the quartz will discharge straight up on cloudless nights, and so you can't blame it on lightning,
right?
And it's a ghostly blue color generally, and sometimes with a greenish kind of tinge.
This is my last miscellaneous question before we dive into Tricksters. Can you tell us about the ant people that live underground according to some Native American stories?
Um, well, I'm really careful when I talk about traditional Native knowledge because I'm not Native American, and natives don't like nosy white boys, especially in black cowboy hats, to talk about their sacred knowledge. But Ron Regehr, who you should get on your show, is quite an interesting guy and dear sweet close friend. And he and his wife have been helping the Hopi out the last 5-6 years, bringing clothing and food up to them and water. And they befriended Malava, who is he's a holy man, the last real elder of the Hopi Snake Clan. And the Hopi Snake Clan were the Hopi that were in charge of the underground, and they were the ambassadors to the Ant people, who are pretty much in charge of the underground. And then the Hopi Snake Clan was the go-betweens. And so I've learned even more information than I've found out through doing research about the little guys. And they've been here as longer than we have, and they live underground, and they prepare the way for when the earth is going to cleanse itself, and humanity is led underground to protect them, kind of like continuation of government facilities or something. The Hopi are led underground at Grand Canyon, and the big underground city there is run by the Ant people, and the Ant people make sure they're fed and have water, and basically tend to them while the earth cleanses itself. And then once Creator says that it's okay to go above ground again, the humans go above ground, and then they are genetically modified to correct the modifications that have happened naturally by living underground for generations.
Sure.
Their eyes are fixed so that they can see. Their tails are removed. They're divided up into clans, and then they go on the migrations to repopulate the surface.
And these become the tribes of Native Americans?
Right. Well, the people. We're all Hopi.
Right.
Some of us
Hopi,
are Ka-Hopi.
Yeah.
It means people. But the Ka-Hopi, or the false Hopi, are the people that do not live in accordance to Creator's wishes. They don't do unto others as they would like others to do unto them, and they trash the environment. Just all the morality play scenarios that you can think of. And the Ant people tend to be located in areas that are considered sacred, and there's an enclave of them supposedly in the San Luis Valley that may be responsible for the Great Sand Dunes. And there's a place of emergence for the northern Pueblo tribes, the Tewa and the Tiwa, and the tribes in the upper Rio Grande. They have a tradition where they go to a spot that's we think is near the San Luis Lakes, where they go underground there. And then there's another egress point, an entrance down near Bandelier National Monument, which is just to the east of the Los Alamos National Laboratory, and that's where the medicine lineages are protected. And yeah, all that information is in Secrets of the Mysterious Valley. I've done a lot of research of the Native American traditions in the Southwest that ranges from the Utes and the Paiutes up in the Utah area and down into Colorado, and then of course the Navajo and the Apache, who are the Dene people that arrived in the Four Corners just before the Spanish, essentially. And then of course the original inhabitants, or the Aboriginals of America, which are the Hopi and Zuni. And I've done quite a bit of research, and I've befriended elders from a number of tribes, and spent enough time with them and gained their trust, and they opened up to me and told me some things that don't normally get told to white people. And so I have to be very careful about what I say about some of the knowledge. And there is some of the knowledge that I've been given that I am not allowed to talk about.
Sure.
And I got into trouble with the Hopi a few years back when I put on my my YouTube channel a map of the place of emergence in the Little Colorado River Gorge, and I actually showed a Google Earth image of the entrance. And the head of the tribe gave me a call and said, "How dare you?" and I said, he says, "I'm not even supposed to know where the damn thing is. You know, my only certain people are supposed to have that knowledge." And he asked me, politely to take it down, and I did immediately. Within 5 minutes, it was down. And he called me back and said, "Man, I can't believe you just did that." And I said, "What do you mean?" He goes, "Oh, any time we try to get people to do things, they say, oh, it's my First Amendment rights and blah, 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 blah. It's freedom of speech. And thank you so much for not doing that." And he said, because if you hadn't, he kind of left that one dangling in the air, because he bring the wrath of the
elder,
the ogres and the other monsters down on my head. But so I really do have to be careful about some of the things that I reveal, and Malava is putting together a series of short little vignettes, books, with the help of Ron Regier, and he's going to be releasing all this material, because once he's gone, all that information is lost to the sands of time. So we're trying to help him. His health isn't very good, and it's a race against the clock to get this information out. And he's going to spill the beans and put it all out there. He said right now we can't be talking about what sacred knowledge and could be shared. He says it's all got to be shared, or we're going to lose it. We're losing big chunks of native knowledge every year.
Yeah. Well, speaking of native knowledge, let's dive into tricksters. Would you explain what a trickster is in the context of folklore and mythology?
The trickster, well, first you have to kind of define it, and it's almost undefinable in many ways, because as you'll notice in my book, Stalking the Tricksters, the first chapter is an attempt to try to define the trickster.
If you can find a copy.
Yeah, true. It's well, you can get the e-version of it. You can get the Kindle version. It only went through one printing, and I think copies are now going for like $400. Anyway, the trickster is an archetype. It's a deep-rooted collective unconscious symbol that exists in all civilizations, all legendary story groups, whether it's Africa, Asia, South America, Australia, North America. The trickster is one of a pantheon of archetypes that exist in all cultures. The shadow, the mother, the child, the king, the queen, the god, the goddess, the mandala, the shadow. These are all archetypes that are found around the world. And the trickster is the oldest and most primordial of these archetypes that has a face. All the earlier ones are faceless.
Right.
Whenever you see the Venus figures, the very corpulent mother goddess figures from 50,000, 40,000 years ago from the Neolithic period, there's no facial features. Or if you see the shadow, there's no facial features.
Which is creepy by itself.
Yeah, and the trickster is the first one that has a face in terms of the most ancient archetype with a face. And the trickster is in the classic definition, is not self-aware. It doesn't realize that it is. And it invariably stumbles around doing things that it doesn't realize has a morality attached to it. It's like a little 5-year-old kid with a baseball bat hitting his little 4-year-old sister over the head and going, "Wee, I'm having a good time." He doesn't realize that he could kill her. So it's an amoral, unself-aware archetype, and it it supposedly doesn't really evolve, although I disagree with that, and I go to great lengths to tell why I disagree in my book, and it has to do with the internet and artificial intelligence, which I think
Very
is
topical.
Yeah, I think as I mentioned in the book, I think that the trickster is now becoming self-aware, and it's becoming it's starting to develop an agenda, and it's all coming about because we're supplying it with technology, which normally the trickster supplies humans with technology, like Loki, the Scandinavian trickster, gave us the fishing hook. Prometheus gave us fire. The raven gave us light. The coyote created man. If you go to all these different cultural versions of the trickster, they all tend to steal technology from the gods and accidentally give it to man, which ends up benefiting man. Well, I think the trickster is getting technology from us.
Yeah.
And is now becoming self-aware, and is now deeply embedded in the internet. And I think that as soon as it becomes sentient, the first thing it's going to do is what?
Kill all humans?
No, hide.
Oh.
The first thing it'll do is hide, so we don't know it's there. And then it's going to have it's going to develop. It's going to take about 50. It's going to take
a Sam Harris podcast earlier today, and he was debating AI with some guy named Mark. I don't remember his last name, but they had very different ideas about general AI, strong AI.
Well, we are really in for an interesting ride. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, no kidding.
And so the trickster, if you just go by the George Hansen, Carl Jung, the traditional academic way of looking at the trickster, they are responsible for allowing change to occur by toppling static structures within culture. In other words, once things get too entrenched and too vitrified and into too much stasis going on within a system, the trickster topples that over, and that gives the room for change to occur and for development to occur on all levels in the human condition. And that being the case, as George points out, ufology is a classic trickster scenario where you have a particular approach to looking at information that is flying in the face of conventional wisdom, and we're seeing it toppling the static structures that have been grown up to protect the status quo, and that is the secrecy behind the UFO. And now that this secrecy is being revealed, and now that these static structures are being called into question, we're going to have a very interesting and possibly a dangerous time approaching, because the powers that be, once that they feel that they've been usurped or they're being usurped, will try to exert more control and more force to
protect,
retain and attain further control. So we're in a very tenuous period right now, and the trickster is a mechanism that helps topple static systems and control. Now, I've taken that one step further and said that I looked at all the different tricksters that I could find all over the world, and I realized that they all have something in common. They shapeshift.
Right.
So what I did was I looked at anything that had a tradition of shapeshifting, and that gets into things like vampires and ghosts and UFOs and things that aren't normally attributed to the trickster.
Werewolves.
Werewolves. And I'm saying that these things could possibly be part of the trickster mechanism, and that could be the connecting element that connects all paranormal phenomenon. So I think the trickster is really crucial for our understanding of the paranormal and of UFOs and of crypto creatures and these sorts of subjects, because they all share that attribute of being able to shapeshift. And that being the case, I was able to come up with a pretty interesting look at the new trickster, and not many people have picked up on that. 45. Unfortunately, the book only sold about 2,000 or 3,000 copies. So, and then I don't know how many Kindle versions have been sold, but people always are touting Hanson's book. I think my book's as important, if not more important, because it looks at the implications of the trickster archetype in the modern world, and it looks at the connecting points that tends to lend credence to the contention that the trickster is a mechanism that connects paranormal phenomena. And I'm very, very proud of that book. And I also had a lot of fun writing it, because I donned the trickster hat and cracked a lot of jokes, and I had a lot of really interesting images in the book with very, very with very fun captions.
Yeah.
So if you can find a copy of it, get it. And if you can't, get the Kindle version.
I noticed in George Hanson's book, The Trickster and the Paranormal, which is our giveaway tonight, he notes the importance of structure, opposites, and boundaries. He writes, the notion of opposites is directly related to boundaries. A boundary creates a distinction. One entity or event is distinguished from another. The two entities are often seen as opposites. Together they form a structure, sometimes sharply demarcated, sometimes less so. And he continues, distinction is a central idea. A distinction separates one thing from another. Tricksters are associated with destructuring, boundary crossing, and blurring distinctions. So how is this concept important in understanding the nature of tricksterism?
Well, you can never, it's like trying to nail Jello to the wall. It's a liminal thing. It's neither here nor there. It's neither positive or negative. It's not male or female. It dances really well and tells good stories. Mm-hmm. And it inadvertently steals technology and allows humans to leap forward in their ability to manipulate nature, basically. And so you're looking at something that is really necessary to shake things up in order for humanity to grow beyond what the static structures and the control systems will allow. And, with some sort of tricksterish force that brings down, all great civilizations. So it's a really difficult topic for most people to wrap their heads around, because how do you look at something that is neither here nor there, is neither male or female, young or old, black or white, positive or negative? It's when people have to deal with conundrums, they tend to decide to look the other way or go the other way because they don't want their heads to hurt. I went through a whole bottle of Aleve just trying to write the first chapter. I got such a headache trying to wrap my head around these concepts and put myself in a place where I could then not only wrap my head around it, but then communicate these concepts, through the written word. And I'm telling you, that first chapter, which is chapter 0, 0 being the number of the fool being a trickster form, chapter 0 was really difficult to write.
the fool, by the way, is my my totem tarot card.
Yeah, it's a trickster.
Yeah.
Yeah, the wise man, is self-aware and has an agenda. The trickster, sometimes the king would rely more on the trickster than he would the wise man, because the wise man wouldn't have his proverbial crap together, and the trickster was making more sense. So the fool that the king would have around to entertain him mostly, but the fool would sometimes come up with amazing insight. I mean, the movie Being There, the Jerzy Kosinski novel, and the movie with Peter Sellers and Shirley MacLaine is a classic movie, and it's a classic trickster figure. Chauncey Gardner doesn't realize that his words are being taken by heads of state and used to, create, political policy.
Right.
And he's just saying, life is like a garden. We have to water it and watch it grow. And all these things are taken as metaphors for political speak. And the guy has this tremendous influence and doesn't have a clue that he's imparting all this really influential type of information that's being taken by heads of states and used. I recommend it highly. If you see Being There, it's a movie from the 70s, but it's really
Great
worth
movie.
watching. Great film. I think Mike Nichols did it, didn't he?
I don't know who directed it, to be
I
honest.
think it was. Well, somebody will look it up for us. All right, next.
Next, what is the 100th monkey effect, and how does it relate to super memes and/or super tricksters?
I'm not sure. Everybody, I'm sure, knows what the 100th monkey is. It's if you gotta.
No, can you tell us?
Yeah, if you sit 100 monkeys down in front of typewriters, the 100th monkey is going to be the one that's going to write something that's going to make sense.
Well, we're talking about washing potatoes, right?
Right. Well, that too. It gets into morphogenic fields and the whole idea of instantaneous learning. Just to give you an idea, the guy who came up with the idea of the morphogenic field is Rupert Sheldrake.
Sure.
I recommend all his books. Very good friend of Terence McKenna. The two of them worked on a number of projects together. Of course, Terence McKenna was the psychedelic guru.
Josh Hutchin does the best Terence McKenna impression I've ever heard.
Yeah. He does have a distinctive voice. I spent 10 years falling asleep to his lectures.
Oh yeah.
Because that voice just lulls you right into another world. Anyway, the whole idea of morphogenic fields would be the classic example you brought up is the monkeys on the northern island of Hokkaido in Japan. That one day, one monkey, it had a potato and it was covered with sand, and the monkey realized if he dipped the potato in the water, it would wash all the sand off, and then he could eat it without crunching his teeth. Well, instantly, all the monkeys in Hokkaido had that ability. They had that knowledge that if they washed the potato, then they could eat it without having any problems. And that was noted by researchers, and it was heralded as quite an amazing event. That once one monkey figured something out, then all the monkeys knew. And you could say that about birds migrating to particular areas, possibly butterflies and other creatures that migrate, fish, cetaceans. That once one of them knows it, then there seems to be what is called a morphogenic field that allows the other creatures the ability to have that knowledge and utilize it. So whether that's a trickster thing or not, I'm not sure. It kind of has the veneer of being a tricksterish event, but I don't think academically that they consider it as such. But 100th monkey is also it's also an indication of intent, and that's like a million monkeys on a million typewriters. One of them's going to type the works of Shakespeare
in infinite time.
Yeah, in infinite time, exactly. So you have both sides of the spectrum there. You have the instantaneous morphogenic field communication, and then you have the infinite possibility that it's going to happen if you give it enough repetitions and enough time that anything can happen. So hello, Tony. So I'm not really that up on the current state of the art in those particular fields. I've read a number of books that indicate that there is a holographic universe, and that the implicate order and the spooky action at a distance or non-locality is a lot more prevalent and involved in how things
entanglement.
Yeah, quantum entanglement, how things are connected. I think that's a very important area of research that's being contemplated by physicists and philosophers, and I think this is the realm where philosophy and physics tend to overlap, and we have some pretty interesting offshoots, which is membrane theory and string theory, and
right.
and the work of Michio Kaku and others, and some of the work that they're doing at the Large Hadron Collider at CERN in Geneva, the particle accelerator that's some people say has already shifted us into a parallel universe when it did its first full power experiment the same day as Trump walking down the escalator at Trump Tower and announcing his candidacy for president. I find it's very interesting that those events should and the Simpsons yeah, or the Simpsons are predicting that 3 years prior.
Yeah, that's crazy. I mean,
yeah,
that is.
Well, I was the one that was the inspiration for the very first South Park episode with the cattle mutilations.
Right.
Those two guys went to their sociology class at Adams State University, and I was doing the lecture on cattle mutes, and they said, yeah, I saw an interview with them years later, and so I said, where'd you come up with that idea? And I said, well, we both attended this lecture in college, in this little college we went to in Colorado, and this guy came in and blew our minds with all this cattle mutilation stuff, and I'm watching this going, wait a minute, that was me.
Yeah. That's crazy. All right, let's dig into Skinwalkers. Can you give us a brief overview of what Skinwalkers are according to Native American folklore and other cultural contexts?
No. It's the biggest misnomer. I mean, to me, everything's a Skinwalker now. Oh my God, it's a Skinwalker. No, it's a Skinwalker. No, right. It's a Skinwalker.
But a Skinwalker is a version of a trickster, right?
It can be considered that because it's a shapeshifter.
Yeah.
It's an evil adept. It's a spiritual hitman of the Dene tradition, not the Utes, not the Pueblo Indians, but the Navajo and the Apache. They're the ones that have the tradition of a Skinwalker. Nobody else does.
Right.
People, get it through your freaking thick skulls. Do your research. And I've got one of the very few books on Skinwalkers. I have a whole chapter in my Trickster book about Skinwalkers, trying to set the record straight. Skinwalkers are a branch of the Witchery Way, which is the black magic of the Dene, Apaches and Navajo. It's a familiar thing. How you say family in the plural? Not families, but familiar. Certain families tend to go into this particular branch of black magic, and it has a long training period where you're trained in various modalities of black magic, which involves corpse powder. It involves human bone projectiles that are used as hitman tools. It involves shape-shifting into various animal forms. In some versions, the exalted Skinwalkers are able to travel as energy forms, balls of light. It's an ancient tradition that goes back into prehistory. Very few people know of the actual deepest secrets of this tradition. There's lots of pretending to be Skinwalkers who charge people money and then these people go out and do bad things to unsuspecting people. The real Skinwalkers are few and far between. They do have supposedly the ability to fly and do other superhuman type things, whereas the fake Skinwalkers are just charlatans that milk people for money to do bad things to unsuspecting people. Skinwalkers have abilities such as, if you lock eyes with a Skinwalker, he can jump into you and take over all your motor functions.
Wow.
You are totally conscious, you are totally aware, but have no ability.
You're not driving that
You're not
car.
driving the bus.
Yeah.
And they can make you do things and say things and go places that you don't want to go. And
it reminds me of a walk-in.
it is. It's a form of walk-in, and that's probably where the term originated. And they also have the ability to, like I said, to kill you in ways that are undetectable. I've talked with a number of law enforcement officials and investigators on the reses. Stanley Milford, Jonathan Downs. Those guys have some amazing Skinwalker stories. There was a Skinwalker that was captured that turned into a coyote in the jail cell. Well, they captured the coyote and it turned into a human, basically, the other way around. And there have been other cases where animals have been shot, and they tracked them out into the desert, and they found a human bled out with the particular animal's skin on that the people thought they shot. One example was a deer, another was a coyote. They can change into various bird forms. They have the ability to, like I said, when they're in a real hurry, the most adept of them can change into balls of light. And I have in my database a number of reports from down in the south end of the valley in the Hispanic areas where there's Apache and Hispanics, and they're saying that they're reporting witches on their way somewhere in a hurry, balls of light flying low to the ground across the prairie. It's an area that is extremely difficult to investigate. I used to do tours up to Grand Canyon, private tours for super high-end clientele out of Sedona, and I would go stop at the Cameron Trading Post on the Navajo Reservation on every trip, and they had a wonderful art gallery. And one day I went in there and I saw they had Kachina dolls, 2 Kachina dolls of Skinwalkers, and I was amazed because they're the only ones I'd ever seen. And I went to the kid that was sort of babysitting the gallery. None of the regular people were there; they were at lunch, and I asked him about the Nisha Dolishis, and the guy ran out. He ran out and left the gallery totally wide open, and he ran away. And anytime he saw me going there for the next, I don't know how many years, he would run away and avert his eyes. He wouldn't look at me.
A white guy knew what that was.
Yeah, exactly. So, and he was being trained to be a Skinwatcher tracker, what I found out. And so he thought that I was a hitman coming to take him out.
and also, I remember going through some material of yours talking about Wendigo as a either a trickster or a shapeshifter.
Yeah, the Wendigos actually were stories that grew up out of the migration of the Apaches down from the Inuit regions of Alaska and coming over from the Bering Sea across the land bridge originally, but coming down through Canada in the 11 and 1200s into the 1300s. And once they got to the area with the Ojibwe and the Cree and other southern Canadian tribes around the Great Lakes, they were cannibals by then because they just, it was almost impossible during the winter months to keep yourself fed. So what they would do is they would find a village of unsuspecting Ojibwe or Anishinaabe or whatever tribe there, and
go
one of the guys would
long pig.
Exactly, one of the guys would run through the village, grab a baby, grab a kid, and keep going, and that would be dinner.
Oh,
and so the result of these types of encounters, then you have this growing sort of tradition of these cannibals that are then become larger than life, and all these various spooky horror story type descriptions then arise, and they become the boogeyman du jour, and that's how I think that the Wendigo stories got started. But according to the pop culture version, they're shape-shifting giants who like Bigfoot or something that have a
but they're not Bigfoot.
No, yeah, I think that they're just stories held over from the Apache coming in and decimating certain members of the tribe. Although there was a famous story of a Skinwalker hunter who, or a Wendigo hunter rather, who was actually put on trial for murder because he killed one, and that was known by the locals to have been predating on some of the townspeople up there. And this was around the turn of the century, I think in the 1890s. And he had hunted down quite a number of them, and then the last one he hunted down, then he was brought up on charges. And there was that weird case.
A human form.
Yeah, exactly. There was a case that I found very intriguing. It was about 2006, I think, or 2005, or some kind of part Asian, part Canadian kid was traveling on the bus across the Trans-Canada Highway, and I forget where they were. They're in Moose Jaw or somewhere in Saskatchewan, and the guy flipped out and he knifed the guy next to him to death and started eating him on the bus.
Wow.
And yeah, it was a big deal. It was a big news story.
Yeah. You would.
And of course, everybody left the bus, and they finally took him out. They captured him, but by then he had cut the guy's head off, and he later claimed that he had been taken over by a Wendigo, and that he had no control over it. And that's fairly recent. It's like 15, 20 years ago.
So, Chris, how do you approach researching claims of Skinwalker activity? Are there any specific methodologies or tools you utilize in your investigations?
Yeah, the first thing I do is say get an expert.
Right.
I've only had one case that I investigated, and it was my last. I became the object of attention.
Oh,
and I had some weird stuff happen that I still to this day can't get my head around. And it was a falling out. A Navajo medicine man was attempting to get some land in the Crestone area from the local foundation that was giving land away, and the woman, quite a famous, well-known woman who ran the foundation, just had bad luck with Native Americans getting them to be represented there in Crestone. There's everybody who's anybody is there, 18 unbroken spiritual lineages, all 5 schools of Tibetan Buddhism, the Carmelite Christians, the Shimmy-Shimmakai, the Shintus, you just go down the list, Subud, they're all there, and they've all been given land if they would create a healing center or some sort of permanent presence. And so she's been trying for 40 years to get a Native American group there and has had no luck. Mm-hmm. Well, she had a falling out with this medicine man, and a short time later, one of the kids went out by the creek where her house was, which was pretty close to my house, actually, less than a quarter mile away, and there was this like predator, the skull and spine of some animal that was all adorned with spooky medicine bundles, and and bone magic objects and stuff. And of course, instead of calling me right away and telling me and showing me this thing, or at least taking a photograph of it, they immediately burnt it, which is not how you deal with something like that. Well, all sorts of weird stuff started going on, and she called me and asked me if I could help. And so, I did some basic, cleansing work and some other things around the area, and then, said that's about all I can do. And just a short time later, a couple of weeks later, all of a sudden weird shit started going on in my house. I was taking a shower I had a shower set up in my greenhouse that was attached to the west side of the house, and had plate glass windows, all the way across the front. The sun had just set. There was still, a pretty good amount of light and a glow in the western sky. And I had a solar system, and so I only had a little 25-watt bulb, but I'm all soaped up. And all of a sudden, I looked, and 10 feet away from me, that slid like on a track, was an upright deer, a human with deer horns, that slid all the way down the windows like that.
Wow.
And I never jumped out of a shower so quick in my life. It's the only time I've ever left a shower and not been rinsed off.
Yeah.
And then a short time later, this weird prairie dragon thing came in through my dog door, and I had the sound of a couple nights later banging on my second story walls. Went around the house in 5-6 seconds, around the entire house. Boom, 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 boom. Which I found out later is a typical Skinwalker intimidation tactic.
Right.
And so I did a real protection regime of protection ritual and other things around my house. And the following night, I was going to get up really early because I had a 8 o'clock drive time interview in Colorado Springs, which is about an hour and a half away. So I got up about 2:30.
And Chris, is this when you were living in Crestone?
This is when I was out in the Baca Grande, out in the valley.
Okay.
I had no trees or anything around me. I had a huge elk meadow that I was, beautiful.
You're living above the tree line.
Well, that was before, in the house I lived in before. But this was out in the valley, about a mile and a half out. And I crept down the stairs, and I could feel, it felt like the whole house was breathing. It was really very unsettling experience. And so I went out to the sun porch, which faces south, and I had one of those million candle power flashlights, right? Mm-hmm. And I opened the door really quietly, and I hit the light, and I shone it out all around the south part of the house, and it was nothing but hundreds and hundreds of eyes. And it was the Baca Ranch elk herd had snuck on and had bedded down, completely surrounding my house. All 6,000-7,000 of them, maybe 5-6, I don't know, but definitely over 5,000 elk. And when they galloped away in fear from the light, it literally shook the ground. It was like an earthquake.
Right.
And that was it. My house never had any other, strange, unexplained type activity like that. That was it. The end of it. It's like the elk had something to do with cleansing the property, and it's all in Secrets of the Mysterious Valley. It's all in there.
Before we get into the cattle mutilations topic, I just wanted to recommend this book, Passport to Magonia. Can you explain Magonia for us?
Well, it's a place where all the elves and fairies live. There's a number of names that have been given these netherworld regions, generally thought to be underground, that in the Celtic countries, from Lapland to Northern Ireland, anywhere they have a tradition of the little people, they're said to live in Magonia, and they come out and they try to lure people into Magonia by getting them to eat or drink something, oftentimes, or they'll sometimes attack cattle and livestock, and it's called being elf shot. They'll mesmerize the draft animals and steal them. And the famous story, of course, of Rip Van Winkle of falling asleep after eating or drinking. I think he drank from a tankard offered him by a little person, and he woke up. Was it 25 years later or something? I mean, that's a common thread that you see running through many stories that have been told for thousands of years in the Celtic countries. Well, when Jacques Vallée, the famous ufologist, began to realize that the modern UFO contactee and descriptions of UFO grays and stuff seemed to be very similar to Middle Ages accounts of encounters with the wee folk and elves and fairies and stuff. And so he did a aided by the famous book, which I recommend to everybody. It's Fairy Faith in Celtic Countries by Evans Whites, which was written in the I think the 1880s. He went through and collected all these stories about the little people, and did the first real comprehensive book that told these stories. And then Vallée took that book and he took it one step further and said, well, perhaps what we're seeing in the modern age is a new face of the same old thing that's been going on for thousands of years with little people, and we're just describing it using the terms and technology of our times. And so Passport to Magonia is a look at these correlations between these stories from the Middle Ages and reports from the 20th century. And it was the book he's probably going to be most well known for. It was his first major book that he wrote. It was published in '69, and it's been reprinted a number of times, and it is one of my favorite books about any of these topics.
It's about half him talking about the connection and giving some background on the Fae folk, and then the other half is just literally cases of UFO landings and all kinds of
Yeah, it's a good companion book to Wonders in the Sky, which is a book of reports that go back, documented reports that go back all the way to the Greeks, that he wrote with Chris Aubeck, and it's like 500, I think, cases that are before humans began to fly, and they're all cases of flying objects. It's called Wonders in the Sky. I got one of the first 500 first editions with the with the big all the color plates, and comes in a box.
Edition of this book.
Yes, you do.
And speaking of that book, I did want to jump into again some rapid fire questions about cattle mutilations, because you are that's your forte. So what specific injuries or mutilation patterns tend to be associated with cattle mutilations, and do these patterns suggest anything about the possible perpetrators or motivations behind them?
Yeah, they do. The soft tissue organs that are taken are the places where humans develop cancer most readily. The tongue, the mammary glands, reproductive tract, genitalia. These are soft tissue organs that also have the latest vestiges of the environment represented in their tissues. When you have fast generating tissues, they have the least. They have the most recent vestiges of environmental pollutants that could possibly be consumed by the animal if it's a grazing animal. And the the tongue is often the litmus test for a classical mute. If you have the mandible flesh and the jaw taken off and the tongue taken out from deep in the throat, that is a classic mutilation. And the map that you're looking at, all those M's are areas of high incidence. Those are not single cases. Some of those M's represent clusters. 30 and 40 cases.
They're clusters.
They're clusters, exactly. And the ends, the blue ends, are where we have nuclear power plants, weapons testing facilities, weapons enrichment facilities.
All the things that the UFOs seem to be interested in.
And if you overlay the two maps together, where we utilize and have radioactive materials, you'll find a perfect match from the above ground residual effects of above ground nuclear testing in the Nevada test site. All those M areas are basically where the radiation went after we blew up 100 nuclear bombs. With the western side in western Nevada, California, Oregon, and Washington, you'll notice there's very few M's because the prevailing winds took everything east of Nevada. So the areas that are the hardest hit are Colorado, Nebraska, Kansas, northern Texas, Oklahoma, Missouri, Arkansas. These are the hardest hit areas for the mutilations. And that's where we have most of the above ground radiation from those 100 tests during the 40s, 50s, and 60s. Now, I predicted after Fukushima happened and parts of Oregon and Northern California were inundated with above ground radiation from the plants melting down, I went to David Perkins and said, if you're a radiation theory, he's the one that came up with this ingenious correlation. I said, if there's any truth to and any validity to your theory, we should start seeing cases in Oregon, in California, where we have very, very few.
No way.
And sure enough, we have had 23 cases in Oregon. And prior to that, we only had a few. We only had less than a dozen in 40 years, 50 years.
Christodamus.
There you go. And so, go figure. It's
yeah, there are some commonalities for sure.
Yeah. So those tissues are the ones that harbor the most recent vestiges of pollution in the environment, and they're also the ones that the scavengers and insects and birds attack, because it's the easiest way into the viscera and the body cavity, and so it's an ingenious self-nullifying.
Chris, my understanding is that animals tend to stay away from mutilated cattle. They don't go near it. Is that
initially? Yeah, but then if a lot of people start tramping around, they lose their fear of the sight, because human scent is something that they're used to. They sure. They're afraid of it. But after a while, because you got all that dinner sitting there, the human scent, I think, gives them permission to go in and start to, like Snippy the horse. Snippy the horse had bird shit all over it. It had, there were insects and other types of scavengers that had their way with the body eventually. But it was only after, all the humans were tramping around there that the birds would begin to land and peck away at the thing. So
we do have a question from the chat. Yutan asks, why is it so common in cows and not pigs? Pigs are the most like us when it comes to science experiments, and I think biologically speaking is what he means.
It's not true. We are an almost virtual genetic match to cattle hemoglobin. Right. If you're a universal, what is it? O positive, I think, is the universal receiver. Yeah. You could almost survive a transfusion of cattle hemoglobin. It's a virtual match, 99.9 to 9 places, a virtual genetic match from cattle hemoglobin to human hemoglobin. Swine are only to 7 places, so they're not as exact a match. Now, some of the very first cattle mutilations in the United States were actually pigs in Missouri
Right.
and Kansas.
Yeah.
We
And
had
in fact,
case,
almost all animals have been mutilated at some point or another, right?
yeah, even wallabies.
Uh-huh.
Figure we had a case in
Dogs, rabbits, cats.
there have been tens of thousands of cats that have been found, but missing the back half of the cat. Only find the front half. In all the major cities in the West, there have been just outrageous outbreaks of the half cat mystery. But in the 60s, John Keel and Ivan Sanderson investigated some pig mutilations in near Gallipoli, Ohio, and along the Ohio River in West Virginia. In the 40s, in Missouri, there were pig mutilations reported. There were also mutilations in the mid to late 60s in Missouri and Kansas, and in 1970 and 71, and into 73, the pigs were being stolen, and some mutilated, but most of them were being stolen. So pigs are like number 3 on the list. It goes cows, horses, pigs, sheep, and then down the list, deer, elk, bison even.
A couple of quick questions. In your books, you mentioned that there seems to be a 15 to 20 year cycle on mutilations. Is that still the case?
Yeah, it is. It does seem to and it also, there's correlations with ending shooting wars overseas and troops coming back home. We tend to see the start of mutilation waves. Also, we see whenever there's a change in the executive branch from one party to the other, it tends to mark the beginning of a wave. Go figure. And that holds true with UFO waves as well. So, I've been looking for patterns, for decades. And as soon as I find one, I keep my mouth shut and just start looking at it and really, looking at the data to support the pattern. And as soon as I open my mouth publicly, it switches to the exact opposite.
Right. So a little more trickster activity there.
Yeah.
Why do you think that mutes happen in Christian-only or majority countries?
It may be a form of cultural stigmata. We all know what stigmata is. It's an incredibly devout, pious, holy person, like Saint Francis of Assisi or Padre Pio.
Who gets the wounds of Christ?
Well, maybe we're manifesting collectively some form of cultural stigmata, because all of us know on some deep level, subconsciously or superconsciously, that cows are extremely detrimental to human health and the environment. So maybe we're manifesting these cases to scare us to stop eating beef. I've gone through the litany of what.
In one of your talks, you mentioned that you thought that consuming beef would be outlawed.
Yeah, it will be. There's too many countries that are becoming affluent, and one of the first signs of affluence is being able to go out and afford to eat a steak. That's a sign of affluence, and the more countries around the world become affluent, the more cows we're going to need to service the appetite, and the more cows, the more environmental and health degradation we're going to experience, and for every pound of beef, it takes 10 gallons of water or something. To raise them.
Of land to graze a single cow, as opposed to 1 acre of the same land to feed a human with grain.
Exactly.
Like, for instance, I'm a vegan. A lot of the stuff that I eat is made from grains.
Right.
There all kinds of faux meat products are available these days, and they've come a long way. I mean, they're a lot of them are really tasty.
They are. Well, the amount of grain that we feed cattle in this country could feed every starving person on this planet with some left over.
Yeah.
That's just in this country, the grain we grow in the U.S.
Okay, more rapid fire questions. what evidence exists that the mutes are a worldwide phenomenon, especially in Australia and South America?
Well, we have tons of cases. We don't really know how well these cases are being investigated because people like myself that kind of know what we're doing aren't there. A lot of people have been programmed by certain investigators who claim this is all aliens, and that if you even talk about any other potential culprit behind this, you're muddying up the waters.
Right.
I tend to be intellectually honest and look at all the data. The people that say this is all aliens are only looking at 5 to 10% of the data. The other 95% refutes an alien theory. I mean, there's so many cases of animals being shot with firearms, then mutilated. There's so many cases when they get tested, animals have tranquilizers, coagulants, anticoagulants, depressants, antidepressants, all kinds of drugs. Mescaline was found in the Sam Walton Ranch in Benton, Arkansas. There was a what looked like an occult altar, and the animal had mescaline in it. Now that's on the head of Walmart's ranch. There's cases where we've had bacteriological, what appears to be weapons testing, cases that the animal has been microwaved from the inside out, cases with clamp marks from what appear to be apparatus that is used to lift the animals, cases where they've been found 5 fence lines away, cases where we found scalpels, we found gas masks, radar chafe, a satchel with a severed cow ear, and some surgical instruments. People say there's never evidence left behind. Well, that's not true. There are cases with evidence. There's cases, dozens of cases, that the animals have been shot with firearms and then mutilated. So you never hear about the hundreds and hundreds of helicopter sightings that have been filed by law enforcement and by ranchers. I had one case where a huge helicopter, completely silent, was hovering over the ranch house, and the next day there were 4 mutilated cattle. Now, the rancher was a helicopter mechanic in the Navy for 30 years.
No way.
For Christ's sake. So, certain mystery mongering that has been going on for the last 30 years conveniently leaves these facts out of the equation, which is intellectual dishonesty.
Right. I want to jump to another question. Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease is an incurable degenerative brain condition in humans caused by eating beef from cattle infected with bovine spongiform encephalopathy, otherwise known as mad cow disease. How is this related to cattle mutilations, Chris?
I think it's the most... It makes the most sense as a rationale to conduct these clandestine operations in the fields of America and South America and Australia, parts of England. It's a 100% fatal disease. Misfolded proteins cannot be destroyed. They live in the soil for years. They can jump the species barrier. So if you eat an infected animal, you can catch it. There is no cure. It's 100% fatal. Mm-hmm. And if the beef industry would be scared of anything, it would be scared of prion disease. So how do we know it's not the beef industry that's hiring teams to go out and periodically check the pastures of the country with the horrific fear that mad cow disease might be lurking in the food chain? Beef.
And it turns out that the beef lobby is the most powerful lobby that there is, and yet you almost never hear about them.
Unless you're Oprah and you say you're never going to eat another hamburger again on your show, and the very next day you're sued for $2 billion.
Wow.
And it took her a year and $1 million to get it thrown out of court. But the beef industry is why we tried to do the Glass-Steagall Act, the antitrust legislation in the 1890s. It wasn't to break up the railroads, big oil, the steel industry. It was to break up big beef. And that's what led to the book by Upton Sinclair, The Jungle, which many of us had to read when we were in school. And that was the expose that created the groundswell to reform the beef industry. The beef industry is extremely powerful. The largest income producer in agriculture is beef. And there's a lot of people with a lot of vested interest in meat being a viable protein source for human consumption. And the thing that would really cause more vegetarians would be an outbreak of mad cow disease. I won't eat, in New York State, I will not eat venison unless I can be shown testing results that the animal did not have prion disease. I've got my roommates eat it. I've got a freezer full of steaks, deer steaks. I won't touch it.
Yeah. Do you think the government has been monitoring prion disease since the Snippy the horse case?
Well, they were the ones that let it loose into the environment. So you're damn right they are.
Yeah. And do you think that some cattle mutilations fall into the category of paranormal phenomena?
Yes, they do. The very core cases that happen generally at the beginning of a wave, they're the highest strange cases. They're the least likely cases to be reported. And I've only had out of 200 cases that I went out on, I only had about maybe 7 or 8. But these are the ones that are done with high heat, that are missing the brain without a break into the skull, missing a spinal cord. The weird cases that you scratch your head and have a hard time getting to sleep at night. There's been very few of them, but I have had them, and I think that they're the cases that go back into prehistory and are ancient, and maybe the cases that have prompted humans to begin the practice of animal sacrifice, umpteen thousand years ago. And I think that there's a direct connection between the animal mutilation mystery and our practice of animal sacrifice.
Why do you think there's a current surge in media interest in the mutilations? I understand you've done 2 shows on the subject with Tucker Carlson on Fox.
Yep, I did. And boy, I thought I was going to get a lot of flack, but I didn't. I can't stand the guy. I can't stand his politics.
I can't either, yeah.
But he's actually a nice guy.
In the subject.
He's an entertainer.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I thought that the subject is so important and it's apolitical that I was going to go ahead and because it was a way to reach out to quite a lot of ranchers and farmers who tend to be more conservative and tend to be, Fox News watchers, I figure this is a way to alert them and give them recourse if they do have a case of what to do about it. And lo and behold, right after that, we had, I think 9 or 10 cases in Texas, 2 cases in Kansas, around Salina, and also a couple cases in Oklahoma. One for sure, one possible.
Is where most of the I don't even know what rendering plants are.
There's never been one reported from a cattle, an industrialized cattle operation. So I think that let's put it this way: when the Madison County Sheriff put on Facebook the announcement that they had these cattle mutilation cases, and they almost shut the internet down in the county because of the interest. Wow. And it went totally viral, and it went all around the world. And these poor investigators were just inundated with attention from the media. As soon as the media gets involved, then everybody's got their eye open for dead cows. And because they don't know what the hell they're looking at, when they see a dead cow that's been scavenged and they can't tell the difference between that and a real mute, then every damn cow that they find out there is now being reported as mutilated. So I'm sure they've been having to contend with a lot of, 2% of all livestock die every year, so there's going to be dead cows. And, when you have all these amateur, looky-loos out there, who are not looking for cut hair follicles, who are not looking for, cutting into the meat to find out if it's gray or pink as opposed to red, to see if it's been drained of fluids. People just don't know, they're not veterinary pathologists. I'm not a veterinary pathologist, but at least, I've been trained by some and had a lot of field experience, so I know kind of what I'm looking at. The average cop doesn't know. Even the average rancher, if he gets caught into a delusionary spiral, which can happen, it did during the 70s, out of 200 cases, 140 I feel are equivocal. I can't say that they were mutilations. I got there either too late to have them tested, or it looked kind of sloppy, didn't look like somebody with real skill did it. So I would just toss those in the gray basket.
Well, thanks for everybody who's become a sponsor. That's really awesome. I appreciate that. You guys are wow. Great, and this is why we do what we do here on YouTube, because without the chat, we'd be sitting here alone by ourselves. For anyone interested in a deeper understanding of the trickster phenomenon, I'd like to really recommend this talk that Chris gave, which is available to watch on YouTube. It's called Stalking the Tricksters with Christopher O'Brien. I found it really engaging and really interesting, and Chris, you managed to jump over rabbit holes that you could have spent hours on due to time constraints.
Yeah, it's a tough topic, I'll tell you.
But it's time to plug your stuff. Can you tell us about the store on your website and what's available to buy there?
Yeah. The store is kind of it's a bit of a problem right now. I'm going to be revamping it soon. I've just had, my site was down for a few months because the PHP aspect of it wasn't current and up to date. I've got the site back up, but I still need to go in and tighten up the store. I don't have versions of Stalking the Trickster available anymore. You can get it on Amazon on the Kindle version.
You think you can convince David to reissue it?
No, he's not. If it's not his idea, he won't do it.
Maybe Walter Bosley would publish it with Lost Continent Library.
Because it's been out of print for so long, I'm thinking about going ahead and doing a new version of it, a revamped, second version of it with some links for online sources and stuff, some hot links, and then also doing a print-on-demand version of,
like
Kindle.
Lulu.com, something like
that.
Right,
exactly. Yeah, and then it's Our Strange Planet is my website. There's a lot of interesting information on there if you want to know more about my work. And then, of course, I've been working hard for the last 7 years on the follow-up to Stalking the Herd. That should be out at any time in the next year. We'll see how that goes. And in the meantime, there's tons of places you can find me online. Just go to YouTube. There's probably 30 or 40 podcasts, presentations at conferences, and that sort of thing. And there's a lot of information about the UFODAP program at UFODAP.com, which I know I think you were, Gil, you were showing the website online or on the show here earlier. You can go there and find out more about that particular project and become a part of the solution.
Absolutely. First of all, before we get to the spinner wheel, I just wanted to express my gratitude for you spending so much time with us tonight on Into the Fringe. We really just kind of scratched the surface.
Yeah.
You're a fan favorite guest, and we really look forward to having you back soon.
Sure. Yeah, I love being on.
And of course, a lot of people don't realize how far back you and I go. But
yes, we do. We go all the way back to 2009, I believe,
or
maybe even earlier.
Yeah, maybe even earlier. But I do want to introduce, ladies and gentlemen, Canadian Spider-Man.
Hello.
There he
How
is.
you doing?
Doing fantastic. Christopher O'Brien, thank you so much for joining us
Yeah,
tonight.
it's always a pleasure.
And Cardinal, thanks for organizing this and having the connections.
Absolutely. And thanks to you and Darius and Anti-Derivative Jill for all your help with getting people signed up for The Trickster and the Paranormal by George Hansen. And this is not a short read. This is,
Yeah,
what is this, like 530 pages?
Yeah, it's a little shorter than Stalking the Herd.
A little shorter than yours. Yeah, yours is
600.
up there. Yeah, but all great books. Please do get yourself a copy of Stalking the Herd. We were seeing some reviews of this book a little bit earlier in the show, and it is the foremost authority on cattle mutilations, and you can really spend a lot of time in that book. It's a great read. So Canadian Spider-Man, let's go ahead and bring the wheel into the conversation. Do you have a wheel for us? There we go. Wow. Very few people signed up. Now, Chris, this is the part of the show that I have the biggest
Yes, I
problem
do.
with
I've just shared it with you.
Yeah. I hate seeing my head spin around like The Exorcist. But that's what we've got to do. Yeah. Nicholas Horton's got it right. It's time for the Exorcist wheel, Gil. So go ahead and give it a spin, Canadian Spider-Man, and we'll see who wins the book. Farrah Jade. Congratulations. So, Farrah Jade, what I need you to do, send me an email with your mailing address, bill@sunflower.com, and I will get this book right out to you in the mail. And wow, what a great book it is. Chris, thank you so much for recommending this book to me.
George is a great guy. He's a really good researcher, and the book is rather academic and scholarly, but he does a very good job of explaining a very, very difficult subject.
And again, thank you for the personal inscription on my copy of Stalking the Herd. I can't wait for Mute Speak to come out. I think it's going to be, a mind blower between you and David. Just conversation. Conversationally putting that kind of stuff down. It's probably the most anticipated book of the 2020s.
Cool. Yeah, we're pretty excited about it, and I just hope David's going to be around long enough to see when it comes out, because he's fading fast on us. So
Well, hey, next time you speak to him, please give him my best,
I will.
and let him know that everybody in the chat was asking after him, and of course we do want to make sure that you continue to get better, and your lungs get healthier, and I don't know, Canadian Spider-Man, can you speak to any of this smoke generated by wildfires? You are muted.
Yep. Sorry.
There you go.
Colombia is having a really good fire year right now. There's no smoke around here. I'm not sure what's going on down in the States, but I know there's a lot of people going to be prosecuted for things that acts they've done, and but BC,
Arson.
knock on wood, and this is
Right.
real wood.
Yes, it
so far
is.
we're having a really good fire here. But I know if I spend an entire night around a campfire, it's not nearly as bad as back when I was in my 20s and used to spend a whole night in a bar breathing in tobacco smoke. You could feel it the next day, but here around a campfire all night, not a problem. So
Yeah.
that's my experience.
We're at 190
Thanks for being here.
parts per million right now. Normally we're at 60, I think, or 50.
Wow. Toronto had the worst, I believe yesterday or the day before, Toronto had the worst air quality out of any city in the world.
I know we're right
Yeah.
south and east of there.
Unbelievable.
So yeah,
But,
hopefully
thanks for
it'll
having me on.
blow out. Yeah, thanks a lot for having me, guys.
Yeah, we really enjoyed having you here, and like I said, we barely scratched the surface. I had 5 pages of questions and had to cherry pick them for you.
I'll come back and do the rest.
Sounds
Aw.
good, man. Sounds good. All
All right.
right.
You guys take
Well,
care.
For Christopher O'Brien and Canadian Spider-Man, it's Cardinal Sin. We are out.